Excellencies, ministers, distinguished officials from the multilateral agencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to this fourth session of the Global Small Island Developing States Leaders, also known as SIDS. My name's Juliette Foster, and over the next 90 minutes, I'll be guiding you through what I'm sure will be a thought-provoking and fascinating discussion, the theme of which is Seeds for All, Hunger for None, enhancing African seed systems to benefit small island developing states. A big subject indeed. The organisers of the Global SIDS Leaders are also extremely grateful for the kind sponsorship of Bayer in supporting these debates at transnational level. So thank you so much for that support. Now, let's go into the past to take a look at the genesis of this debate. It goes all the way back to 1996, the year of the UN World Food Summit, and that declaration which underlined that universal food security can only exist when everyone has permanent physical and economic access to safe, nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and preferences. An ambition that was set to be reached by 2015 and which was further enshrined in the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the ambition of the Sustainable Development Goal number 2 is very specific because it focuses on ending hunger, achieving food security, and improving nutrition, as well as promoting sustainable farming. But whilst zero hunger is a universally accepted aspiration, it is fair to say that time is running out. Sub-Saharan Africa is not on track to meet its target of eradicating all forms of hunger and malnutrition by 2030. The numbers really speak for themselves. Let's take a look at the most recent estimates from 2019, which reports that almost 690 million people, and we're talking here about nearly 9% of the global population, remain undernourished. Now, for small island developing states like the Sub-Saharan African mainland, numbers like this really bring into focus their severe vulnerabilities and food security risks. And of course, it is a situation that has been accentuated by two other key factors, namely climate change and, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic, all of which begs the questions, how do you reverse these dangers? Well, fostering increased access to nutritious food via plant-based innovations, allowing farmers to access new varieties of high-quality climate-adaptive seeds, well, that is one solution. But rolling out these techniques requires cultivation on a scale that is both affordable and manageable. Again, climate change, which I referred to earlier, has an impact with its unpredictable weather patterns, and it challenges both existing cultivation season cycles and, of course, the knowledge of local indigenous farmers. But as this debate will demonstrate, solutions that were pioneered in Africa could be adapted to the particular topographical characteristics and soil compositions of small islands. Mobile technologies, for instance, along with remote sensing services and distributed computing, are improving the access of smallholder farmers to information, techniques, and markets. But how far can they go in tackling these challenges in addition to existing economic and capacity limitations already faced by vulnerable nations? And what about the cost? It's all very well to talk about technology, but who should foot the bill for installing these new innovations? And the question must also be asked, is it possible to design climate-smart seed policies that are sensitive to different soil compositions and farming systems, and which at the same time are capable of delivering socially fair and beneficial outcomes to vulnerable communities, such as those in small island states? So there's plenty for us to consider, and they're just some of the issues that will be examined by our distinguished panel of experts. Let me give you an idea of what's going to happen. Each panelist will give a 5-minute speech, although having said that, there is room for a little bit of leeway on that. And afterwards, or rather during these speeches, they're going to outline their particular position, and after which I will ask them a question. And then, of course, we will come to a more general selection of questions at the end of this first set. So much is happening, plenty of ground to cover. All of that for later, but let's focus now by hearing some opening words of welcome from His Excellency David Doyle. Now, he is the ambassador of St. Kitts and Nevis to UNESCO. He's also the co-founding partner with Ambassador Jean-Paul Carteron of the Solomon Islands of the GSL initiative.
Thank you, Juliette. Excellencies, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to this Global SIDS Leaders event devoted to SIDS for All, hunger for none, and perhaps importantly, its implications for small island developing states, known under the acronym of SIDS. Now, this is the fourth such event, bringing together leading experts from the UN family of organizations across the globe, multilateral and bilateral donors and countries, prominent research institutions, and of course, ministers from the small islands themselves to debate critical strategic issues of importance to the future sustainability of small island developing states. The genesis of this Global SIDS Leaders initiative was driven by the need in a very increasingly multipolar world to raise the profile of small island developing states on the international agenda. The objective is to secure a better understanding of the small islands' specific challenges, build mutual support at key transnational and regional negotiations, whether it's addressing the destructive nature of climate change or combating the spread of COVID, managing indebtedness, or as the topic of today's event explores, developing innovative agricultural technologies to meet the particular needs of small island developing states. Now, small island developing states represent something like 38 independent sovereign states scattered indeed across the globe, from the Caribbean to the Atlantic Ocean, from the Pacific to the Indian Ocean, representing 20% of the UN membership. Now, whilst we are very proud of the fact we have 20% of the UN membership, or 1/5 if you like, SIDS' remoteness, size, limited institutional capacity sometimes results in many of these islands, if not all of them, facing particular challenges in getting their collective voices heard at bilateral and multilateral level discussions. It was with this ambition in mind that my partner in this particular initiative, Ambassador Jean-Paul Carteron of the Solomon Islands, we instigated the Global SIDS Leaders Initiative to give a more assertive voice to SIDS at transnational level. Ultimately, it's through important and timely debates of this nature, such as today, on the development of new SIDS technology being pioneered in Africa with potential for small island developing states, that we seek to inscribe the small island strengths, opportunities, risks, and weaknesses on the global development agenda, and also allow SIDS to become essentially an integral part also of identifying the solutions. So without further ado, let me just also underline our deep appreciation to the sponsor of this event, Bayer, and I wish you all an enjoyable debate. Thank you.
Ambassador Doyle, thank you for those words. Let's move on now to our next speaker, who is the lawyer, political scientist, writer, public speaker, career diplomat. I think I'm really just skimming the surface of your career. His Excellency Mario Arvelo. Now, he's the ambassador of the Dominican Republic to the Food and Agriculture Organization. Excellency, it's very good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. The floor is now yours, and you have 5 minutes, around 5 minutes.
Thank you, Juliette, very much for your introduction. And I am very glad to be in a panel of such distinguished individuals who are also representing prestigious institutions from all over the world. I would like to give special thanks to Ambassador Carteron and Ambassador Doyle for opening the doors of the GSL, the group of SIDS leaders, and for inviting me to partake in this conversation. I am speaking right now from Santo Domingo. This is the capital of the Dominican Republic. It's where we like to say that all started, in the sense that this is the place where Christopher Columbus first set foot in the Americas. And this is where the European conquest of the Americas began taking place back in 1492. And we are part, together with our sister republic of Haiti, of a very small tropical island in the middle of the Caribbean Sea. I myself was born 200 meters from the coast. And this means that I grew up experiencing the destructive power of hurricanes and the tropical rains and sometimes the droughts and all that has to do with the fact that we are a SIDS, a small island developing state. And let me just say that I am not only speaking from my experiences as a representative from the Dominican Republic, also having chaired the Committee on World Food Security and the Committee on Agriculture, both at FAO in Rome, I have learned a few things. A word about CFS. This is an inclusive structure. The CFS, the Committee on World Food Security, has not just, it's not just an intergovernmental institution. It also has civil society mechanism, research centers, international financial institutions, universities, and many other relevant actors in the discussion on food security and nutrition. In point of fact, our sponsor, Bayer, is an active participant in the private sector mechanism in exercise of their corporate social responsibility and, of course, their know-how in food systems. And I would like to refer briefly to the presence of Ambassador Kenny Lorea in the panel. He shows the importance of parliamentarians being brought into the equation, being brought into the discussion. This is a no-brainer because legislators have the authority to enact legal frameworks in the territories that they work in. And networks of parliamentarians against hunger, for instance, which is something that didn't exist 10, 12 years ago. Now most countries have these mechanisms. And this is not just about, he said that he was speaking on a Solomon Island-centric frame of mind, but it is not, Ambassador. You made points that are valid for all SIDS, for all small island developing states. And I would like to follow up with you from an ACP perspective. The mechanisms working out of Brussels are doing a great job on this. And definitely this is something that we need to pursue. Ambassador Doyle, in his intervention, put the finger on, I would like also to mention briefly, on the larger problems that we face as SIDS, the remoteness of many of our islands, and that has consequences, time and money. It's not easy to hop on a plane from the middle of the Pacific or from the Caribbean or the Indian Ocean and arrive at the centers where these discussions are being made in Europe and in North America and elsewhere. When we talk about size, when Ambassador Doyle mentioned size, especially because we are islands, because there are other smallish countries like Belgium or the Netherlands or Switzerland, they are quite small, but they have a global presence. The point is that economic opportunities are scarce in small island developing states. And this in turn means that investment in infrastructure, for instance, is limited. We need to look at Tonga, what's happening in the aftermath of a devastating volcanic eruption followed by a tsunami, all of the problems that they are facing precisely because of lack of infrastructure. And Ambassador Doyle mentioned also the limited institutional capacity on the ground. And this is a function of population. We know that citizens of Nauru or Palau or Tuvalu number in the lower tens of thousands. So this is also a huge challenge. But I will add some political obstacles having to do with difficulties, for instance, of obtaining a visa to enter developed countries. It is not always easy to get a visa from one day to the next, or even from 1 week to the next, to, again, hop on a plane and spend a lot of time and a lot of money to get to discussions in Rome, for instance, because we need a Schengen visa, which is not easy to get, as opposed to developed country representatives and government officials that can make that trip just with their passport. So this is a challenge that we can overcome. Getting our collective voice heard in multilateral fora is something that we can address and that we can resolve on our own. Fragmentation is a huge problem that we can tackle through our own devices. I know for a fact, and this I discussed with Ambassador Sacco, who has had to leave, that we need to strengthen our political capital. I had many conversations with her, especially during a difficult period for me. Last year, I was coming out of a COVID infection, and I was running for a chair of the FAO Council, and she had, with enormous grace, she shared her knowledge of how things work in Africa and in the developing world. I would like to very briefly touch upon, I believe I have some seconds left from my turn, about Ms. Semedo. Maria Elena, we met, as she of course remembers, in Accra in Ghana back in 2009. She was working as regional director for the FAO in Africa. And she mentioned technical challenges, soils, biodiversity, pests, climate unpredictability. And the point that I want to make from her intervention is that we as ambassadors, we are well aware that FAO, as well as IFAD and WFP, all the whole UN family, they are looking out for us. They are looking out for the vulnerable countries, the SIDS. This is done at the macro level, from their secretariats in Rome and from the decentralized network that they have working in regional, country level. Later today, I'm meeting the FAO representative in the Dominican Republic, Mr. Castañeda. And in our agenda, we will be tackling how permanent representatives to the UN can also bring political pressure, not on the organization, because again, the organization, the FAO and the others, they are looking out for us. The point is that the developed countries, those that are fully represented with ambassadors on the ground, they are in the political fora within these organizations. They are taking the lead and they are looking out for themselves. And we are an afterthought. And if you listen to their speeches, they all want to save the world, but saving themselves first. So there is a renewed attention in the wide world to the UN, especially in these times of pandemic. WHO is the face of the UN in fighting of the pandemic, and it is a crucial partner in food security because of its work on nutrition and food safety. But we need to ride that wave of consciousness. People all over the world are realizing that the enormous problems of our time require common solutions, and that we are underrepresented at the UN in terms of having representations on the ground, and this is something that we need to strengthen. So let us take a page from our gracious organizer, Ambassador Carteron and Ambassador Doyle, and let us hold hands together and increase the political capital that is dormant, and that we need to wake it up and be more forceful in Rome, in New York, in Geneva, in Paris, Vienna, Brussels, and Nairobi, and everywhere, at every place where the United Nations has Addis Ababa and so on, an office. We need to be there, and we need to make our voices heard. We have to speak strongly. Thank you, Juliette, very much for the time that you have conceded me.
Oh, well, thank you very much for that very powerful and heartfelt expression there. Strength in numbers, that lies at the root of it. And let's take that concept, because how can you use that strength in numbers, that amplified voice, to help small-scale producers in small island developing states like the Dominican Republic actually bring their products to market at a low cost, to be heard, to trade in a level playing field?
Well, this is something that goes beyond my remit, but this is something that my colleague, the Dominican ambassador in Geneva to the world, to the agencies dealing with commerce and trade, the World Trade Organization is the agency I was looking for. We face a number of non-tariff barriers, and this is no secret. FAO has been doing great work in policy advice for our countries, how to get the products from our countries to the world markets, but also helping our local capacities for feeding ourselves. This is something that is extremely difficult for small island developing states because we do not have the economies of scale. So we need to rely on niche products. In the case of the Dominican Republic, we are one of the largest world producers in, despite our smallish size, on cocoa and coffee made that are certified organic. But this is because we cannot compete with the larger producers in bulk. So this is something that, again, we need to make our voices heard, because FAO and others are looking out for us. And I will finish with this, when you see the representation of the Pacific Islands outside of New York, where everybody's represented, but outside of New York, what you see is that we have, as a region, they have the Pacific region has political capital that is exercised by the larger countries, namely Australia and New Zealand. And they consult. I have been told that they consult with the Kiribati and Tokelau and Niue and the Marshall and Solomon Islands and so on and so forth. But in the end, what you hear is a speech that is very closely aligned with the US and Canada and the European Union and Japan and other developed countries. So what we need to do, again, is to get that strength in numbers into the ground, because like the little prince hopping from planet to planet, he found this king who said that he owned the stars because he counted them and wrote down the numbers of the stars. And the little prince told him, well, there's very little that you can do numbering the stars if they do not actually are useful. So it matters little if we are 38 or 40 small island developing states if we do not convert those numbers into concrete actions at multilateral level.
Excellency, thank you so much for answering my question. So thank you so much for those of you who have taken part in today's discussion. We appreciate your contribution and we look forward to seeing you, well, hearing from you again in the not too distant future. Because remember, the small island developing states, this is their time. Their voices are being heard. It's time for all of us to listen and to work together. Thank you.